Welcome to my tutorial for Adventure Island for the Game Boy. And this game took me around 2 hours and 10 minutes to beat. And although I did beat this quite a bit quicker than the Adventure Island 2 for the Game Boy, which I believe may have taken around 4 hours, I found this one harder just because it was more fucking irritating. The main reason being is that there's severe input lag on the controls caused by the game has some technical issues where there's a lot of slowdown throughout the entire game. And it's the worst type of slowdown. It's a type where it's uneven slowdown. So, one moment you're moving at regular speed or semi-regular speed. The game never seems to run that way. But you're running, you're walking around at normal speed, and then all of a sudden it speeds up and you go into a pit. You know what I mean? It's just really inconsistent slowdown issues. And it's to the point where it eats your inputs, meaning sometimes, your attacks don't come out, or worse, you don't jump. So it is a one-hit death game unless you have a rideable dragon. So a lot of times that will get you killed. So that was the hardest thing about the game, because otherwise, like with the second game, I'm able to kind of just run through for the most part a lot of these stages. But because of the lag and dropped inputs, I would die a lot more, and I'd have to play extra carefully and kind of just slow myself down intentionally so that I wouldn't die. So it was definitely an irritation, even though if a game takes me longer, you might think it's harder, but for me, a lot of times it's harder dealing with shitty controls. So that's the main issue. But aside from that, the core game, I'm definitely going to review this game. The core game is actually really solid. It's quite a good core game. Like, if you didn't have the technical issues and it was just the gameplay and the controls, everything would be really good. So it's programmed well in that regard, but it didn't really take into account, how to get around the technical issues of the Game Boy. Now, Adventure Island 2 has just as much action as this one does on the Game Boy, and that's based off of the NES Adventure Island 2. And that one, it has just as much, action and shit like that, but it runs way better. There's not like these kind of issues with the slowdown. So they figured out how to fix it, in the sequel. Now, this game for Game Boy is also not really based on the first Adventure Island game. It seems based on the first Adventure Island game on the NES is very different than this. I feel like this one might be based more on one of the newer Adventure Island games on the NES, though I'm not sure which one. I believe Adventure Island 2 for the Game Boy, is based on Adventure Island 2 for the NES, but I could be wrong, but I think that's what it's based on. I still have to beat those games. I haven't really played those much. I'm at the end of Adventure Island for NES, which is a much harder game than all these Game Boy games, but this game is not nearly as cheap as that is when it comes to how difficult the stages can be, and the fact that in Adventure Island NES for NES they stop giving you weapons after a certain point, so you're pretty much forced to beat stages with no weapons, or you have to get there and bring the weapons through several stages without a single death, and of course you do die in one hit, so it is pretty unforgiving. But this game really isn't too difficult. It's just that anytime I ran into difficulty, it was because I wasn't getting a response on the controls that I wanted. Otherwise, I'd be fucking tearing through this game, So with all that said, that's the main thing. But the game does give you unlimited continues. And with this game, you don't always get to start from the last stage you got to. You got to get to certain stages which act as checkpoints. So whenever you see a stage with this background, with these red little design, but on Game Boy it's not going to look like this. This is on the Super Game Boy Color, which adds color to the games. But whenever you see this particular background, this is usually a checkpoint stage, meaning if you lose all your lives, you'll start here. But if you don't get to these stages, then normally you might have to redo 2 or 3 stages to get back to one of the stages that acts as a checkpoint. So that's pretty much how it works. There's usually like a few stages that you'll have to beat in a row with your set of lives. You start with a default set of 3 lives, I believe, and you'll have to beat those stages on whatever lives you have. But if you lose all your lives, you'll go out to the continue screen, and when you continue, you'll start back on the last checkpoint stage you got to, whatever stage acted as a checkpoint. So usually it's one of those stages with the background I mentioned, or it will be it's usually something like that. But I think there are some exceptions. You'll see, because you'll see where you start at when you die, but it's pretty forgiving with that. I believe Adventure Island 2 for Game Boy, it lets you start on whatever stage you got to. I think it was a little bit more forgiving if I remember right. But this game, not so much. It has an overworld map, but it's kind of just a facade. Adventure Island 2 for Game Boy was based on the NES, like I said, the Adventure Island 2 for NES, but it actually lets you use the overhead map to go back to stages you already completed, and you can move around and do different stages and shit like that. But in this, it's just a decoration. I don't think there's any way to go back. And you really don't need to. You can hold, a certain amount of items, like you can have rideable dragons and shit like that you can stock up, hammers. But I believe you pretty much have to get them throughout the course of your successful run. You can't go back and collect more. In Adventure Island 2 for Game Boy, you'll see in my tutorial that I went back and farmed to get a bunch of hammers and shit like that. But in this, you can't do that. But although you will be forced sometimes to do stages with no starting weapon, it's never really that difficult. But it can be challenging, like I said, because of the controls. The bosses in this game are even easier than they were in Adventure Island 2 for the Game Boy. They're most of them are dead easy. And you can pretty much just jam hammers into them and kill them really fast. Now I am using Turbo, which I switch on and off on my controller as needed, because sometimes it gets in the way, but I do have the fire button set to Turbo for most of the game. But I am constantly switching it on and off throughout the stages, because when you do that, you can't run. Because you need to hold down the fire button to run as well. So if you have it set to turbo, the run won't work. So I do switch it on and off so that I'm able to run. Because sometimes you do need to run to make certain jumps. You need to do a full running jump to make certain leaps. I pretty much just adapt in the moment and just switch it on and off very quickly. The control, the M30 by 8-Bit Do is great for that. You can toggle it on and off very, very quickly. There's a button that you hold down to toggle it on and off right below the buttons that you're using, the main buttons you're using. So you can easily just switch turbo on and off pretty much in an instant. And, you switch it off, then you switch it back on again very quickly. So there's no switches or anything like that. So it works really well when you need to do that in a game. But you can just mash the button and it should work fine. I don't know if you'll be able to speed kill the bosses as fast as I do without turbo, because I didn't test that. But you may have to fight them a little bit longer. But a lot of them can be killed extremely quickly. So yeah, as I said, it's one-hit deaths. You got your checkpoint stages that you have to get to. Unlimited continues. And you just pick up weapons and rideable dragons throughout the stages. At the end of each stage, you pick an egg. And if you get the right one, you'll get a 1-up. So that can help if you're trying to beat a few stages in a row, to get to the checkpoint stage. It can help to get a few 1-ups. And that's really about all there is to the game. There is, I believe, 6 worlds. And maybe they have 6 stages each, something like that. I don't remember exactly how many stages in each world, but you can see the game is only about an hour long if you don't die. Because this is with deaths edited out. So I guess I spent maybe a little bit over an hour of failed attempts. Not much. Because it only took me about 2 hours and 10 minutes to beat, and the game's really only about an hour long. But like I said, most of my deaths came from bullshit. It was from my controls not responding. Especially I'd get on some slopes and the character just won't jump. And then you go in the hole. So I had to actually fucking stop. Let me stop, take a moment. Fucking take in the fresh air, you know what I mean? Fuck around, jack off, and then maybe the control will respond. So that's what I recommend. Like, if you're having trouble with your inputs getting eaten, just, fucking slow your roll. You just got to fucking slow down. And it's not, it's not something that you naturally want to do if you're a fast player like I am. I like to play really aggressively, but it's something you may need to do for this game because it's not going to respond if you try to just run through and haul ass. Now, if the game was better made, then that wouldn't be an issue. You'd really be able to tear through this game because it's really not that hard. Especially if you're familiar with older Adventure Island games. This is a fucking, this game's a joke. It's like a free kill. But I could still see it being challenging to people who don't play a lot of platformer games. Haven't played through a lot of these type of games, or maybe play more new games and don't really play old games. So it's going to vary for the player. But, as far as comparing this to other platformers, especially from that time, this is a super easy fucking game, compared to those. And, that's even compared to moderate games like Contra for the NES without the Konami code, which to me is a moderate game. That's way harder than this. And that game, for me, that game's pretty easy overall. I mean, moderate. But this game really, I think the main challenge is just going to be, shitty response time with the controls. So you got to kind of slow it down. And there's not going to be a hell of a lot to say. There's really less to give a tutorial about for this game than there was for Adventure Island 2. But I figured I would bust it out and just try to make it a little bit entertaining, give a little bit of feedback. My channel is almost like a video journal, because it doesn't always get a lot of views, but it's like I like kind of documenting some of this shit. It's just kind of cool to go back to. But this game, like I said, it's pretty good. I'm definitely going to review it. I did like the game, but I just felt like it was plagued by those technical issues that really stripped a lot of the fun out of it. But I mean, I still enjoyed it overall, but it was just kind of irritating to have to deal with controls not responding, especially on some of those slopes. So you may have to slow down when going down one of these slopes before making your jump. That's why I'm not running through it at a full speed, because my controls would just get eaten up. This game doesn't have tons of surprise areas, like you land on a ledge and the enemy is right there, like the other Adventure Island games where you land on a ledge and you die because the enemy stands right where you're going to land. The game doesn't really have a lot of troll shit like that, so for the most part it's pretty fucking easy going. And you have your swimming stages, just like there was in the sequel to the Game Boy. Adventure Island 2 had these as well, and it's the same principle here, pretty much the exact same thing, where you just mash your attack button and just kind of just stay in the middle of the screen for most of the stage, and you should be fine. You may have to dodge certain things. The seahorses take 2 hits, so don't try to bull rush them. But aside from that, yeah, not too much that you have to worry about in these stages. These are the easiest stages in the game. And when you do die on a boss, you will have to restart the last stage you got to. And usually I think the boss stages are checkpoint stages, so I think even if you continue, you can start on the boss stage, if I remember right. I don't remember ever having to go back all the way from a boss. But here is your first boss. Very easy. I like to stay all the way in the back so I have time to adjust my movement, because in the water your movement is very slow. Your up and down movement is very slow. So you can't really make fast, vertical movements as you can on land. So, it's good to stay all the way back, and, you want to react preemptively. You don't want to wait for the projectile to be right on you like you would on land. You can wait for shit to be right up to you and dodge it usually. Maybe not so much in this game. This game is not these controls are not the best with all this input lag, but generally you can cut it pretty close. But in the water, you'll want to probably react about a second earlier, because it's the vertical movement is so slow and delayed. So luckily, a lot of these stages do give you hammers early in the stage, which is good. So you're not going to be without a weapon too long, usually, from what I remember. I don't remember having to be without a weapon for too long. I have to go through and beat the Adventure Island 2, 3, and 4 on the NES and Famicom. Never really played those much at all. I may have tried them for a second or so. I don't think I ever actually tried to work on them or anything. But I also want to finish the first game, Adventure Island 1, which I'm near the end of. But I'm at the part where the game stops giving you weapons, where it starts to get quite difficult. So I got to put some time into some of those stages. So this, I believe, is the checkpoint stage for this world, at least one of them. I don't know if there is. I didn't pay enough attention to know if there's multiple checkpoint stages for most of the worlds, but whenever you see this background, I remember this was like a checkpoint. So that much I noticed. What you want to do is kind of inch the screen and lure out the enemy so that the bats come down and then hit them with the hammer. And then if you don't have a hammer, then you're going to have to survive to the point in the stage where they give you a hammer, which sometimes can be tough. So it's better if you can just play it carefully on the first time, obviously, because it's a short stage. But just remember to kind of inch out on the ledge until the bat approaches you and then try to take it out. You do have a timer, too. It's a very short timer if you're standing around doing nothing, but it's replenished by fruit that you collect. So if that runs out, you will die. But they give you a lot of time if you're actually playing the game. You shouldn't have a problem. Because fruit is pretty frequent most of the time, so you can usually get it back. So you can take a moment to kind of take your time and move somewhat slow. Whenever you're moving past these trees, if you see a coconut on top of one of the trees, just run straight under it, but don't stop at all or you'll get hit by the coconut. As long as you keep running, you'll be fine. But just be aware, don't stop right where the coconut is or you'll get killed. It also bounces. So you want to avoid all that. So you just run under here. If you stop at all though, even for a moment, you see how close it is, but if you keep running, you'll be fine. You don't have to worry about it. I don't know if just walking will work. I think you have to be running. Which, if you hold down your attack button, that's how you run. So if you set that to turbo, obviously, you'll be mashing it basically, so it won't really run properly. So you may have to toggle it on and off like I did if you're using a controller where you can do that. But again, you really don't need a turbo controller for the game. I mean, you can just mash the button. Sometimes I would just disable it anyway for the stage and just mash it. Sometimes I would keep turbo on if I knew it was a straightforward stage with no real platforming, just a lot of enemies like this. Then I might leave turbo on for the whole stage. But if I saw a big jump that I would have to make, then I would toggle it off. So that's pretty much what I did with that. The dragons are great because they have a decent range, but more than the range, they have a fast firing rate, and it allows you to take an extra hit whenever you have a dragon. So they can also destroy things like boulders and shit like that. So they do make the stages a lot easier, especially these stages that don't really have any platforming, where it's just enemies. It makes it super fucking easy. The frogs will, always jump at you when you get within range, but you can just let them jump over you, and they'll go over your head if you walk towards them. So that's another way to deal with frogs, which you'll see more of later. So these little bonus stages, you can get some weapons and stuff sometimes. Completing them doesn't seem to be really that beneficial. But either way, I think you start off a little bit farther into the stage when you go into these stages. Or maybe you start off right where you were at. I'm really not sure. I may be mixing this up with the other Adventure Island game I just beat, the second game, which I have a tutorial up for as well and a review. So check those out if you're interested in that one. That is the better game just because it runs better. If it was down to the core game of both games, they would be pretty close for me. But I do like how the second game lets you go back, redo stages, get weapons and stuff. That's pretty cool. So I'd probably give the edge to that. But they're very close in quality, aside from all the technical issues this one has. But they're aside from that, they are close. So watch out for the birds. They're pretty big enemies, but they're easy to take out. Just be aware of them, because they will be pretty aggressive. But luckily, as long as you have a hammer, which I think you may get early in the stage, just clear out everything before moving forward. It makes it a lot easier. You can play, carefully throughout most of the game. As I mentioned in my tutorial of the second game, the main thing is just keep firing as you're walking on the ground and mix in some jump shots, Make sure you're firing in the air as you're moving forward, too, because it'll hit more range. Your hammers will cover more area. And you can take out a lot of enemies just as they appear on screen before they even get to you. So now you see, I think I switched turbo on. But I got that little hidden egg, and that gave me a 1-up. Sometimes you get 3-ups from them, so it is good to get those hidden eggs. The other good thing about that hidden egg is that if you die on this stage, you can go back and get that egg again, and you'll get at least a 1-up out of it usually. I'm not sure if there's a way to farm 99 lives by continually going back to those bonus stages, but it's really not necessary. I mean, you'd really have to be struggling with the game to want to have 99 lives with this. Because, you get checkpoints every few stages anyway. And there are no checkpoints in the stages, so lives are not going to let you, die midway through a stage and resume. So they're not super beneficial. So for this, you're going to just follow the positions I used. Made it easy to hit this guy without too much trouble. I ended up switching because I wasn't able to hit them from those top platforms. So I guess just get down here. And if you're using turbo, you'll just fucking melt that boss with turbo. It may take a little longer if you're mashing a button. You see how fast the bosses can die, though. So we're approaching the halfway point now. And the game will amp up in difficulty a bit. At the end, you will be forced to do a pretty large stretch of like 2 stages before the final boss, I believe. Which can be slightly tricky, only because of the bad controls, the delayed controls. But other than that, it's pretty damn easy. So yeah, just some platforming. Just make sure you jump over the spiders at the very least. You don't have to kill them, but I would recommend not trying to run through and jump really quickly because of the delayed control. So, just kind of take it slow. Make sure each of your jumps is very deliberate. So if you see a flower that you can't collect, then that's when a fox is going to come out behind you. So, look for the flowers that when you collect them, they don't go away and let you collect them. And that's going to be when a fox comes out. If you see 2 flowers in a row that you can't collect, that means 2 foxes are going to come up behind you. So there is a certain distance each time that triggers the fox. So once you know that distance, you can deal with them more consistently. Easiest thing to do is to either jump them or just keep turning back and firing to cover your bases. I believe they take 2 shots to take down, which might vary depending on what you're using, a dragon or a regular hammer, but just be aware of them. You want to kind of inch the screen and lure them out and then either jump over them or turn back and fire at them constantly. Like that, but that was cutting it a little close. So you get a 1-up by breaking that rock. When you have the dragon, you can break rocks. Either the small rocks or the boulders, which is really useful. And I believe at this point I actually started racking up some lives, and I went for a pretty long stretch before I used my next continue. Because I remember in editing, I didn't really have to edit this part too much. Well, for this part, I edited out all the deaths for the tutorial to shorten it, but in my first edit, I just edited out unsuccessful continues, so that one was a little bit more drawn out. It was about, I don't remember how long that one was. Maybe it might have been an hour and a half still, but the tutorials are usually the shortest version of the playthrough I put out, edited down, the heaviest. But yeah, this is another water stage. Super easy. These are all pretty much nearly identical. None of them are challenging. You may have to swim under some shit, but they're super easy. Watch out for the spikes, obviously. So now this stage, do the same thing with spamming your attacks. I believe this stage has some new enemies like these rabbits, but really very easy stage if you just keep spamming your weapons. There's a little bonus area here you can reveal, and this will give you a weapon. I don't know if that one ever gives you any 1-ups, but you can at least get a... I think that might be a dragon. I'm not sure. Maybe it's for use later. But either way, it's very easy. As long as you get your hammers. If you don't have them, you'll probably be able to get them early in the stage. But just mow everything down. The penguins will try to slide at you, but if you're being aggressive, with your hammers and jump shots and all that shit, you can easily take stuff out before it really gets close most of the time. So now you get this bird. And this bird is great for pulling bullshit. A lot of times you can fly over the stage and skip the stage, but you see I got hit by something up there. They do put shit up at the top to try to knock you down, so be aware of it. But, with the bird you can potentially skip a lot of the stages. So it can be useful. I didn't have it for too long. I did use it to skip a few stages in the second game. They did have the same dragons in that game too. So that's where I'm more familiar with skipping the stages. This may be a checkpoint, but I'm not sure. But that previous stage was so easy anyway, it wouldn't really matter too much. So again, just move slow and just try to clear out these enemies ahead of time. Get another dragon here. Try to lure out the spikes so they don't come down on you when you're trying to do the platforming. I really didn't trust the control, so I was just trying to kind of inch the screen and, get through that way. But the stages are pretty short. They never go on for too long. So here's another boss. A super easy boss, as usual. I just get up here and grind the fucking thing to death pretty much. It probably does take longer if you're just with the hammer. But I didn't play it like that, so I couldn't tell you, what the difference would be. But... worst case, you may have to learn how to dodge some shit if it takes a little longer, but what I recommend doing with these games is making a save state on parts like the bosses and just practice with the save state on an emulator. Just practice it a few times. Make sure you can beat it a few times in a row. Or at least make sure you know the basic strat you're going to use, and then, then you can just commit suicide and, replay the stage as normal. That's something that I always do with these games. I always use save states for practice. So the coconut, you can lure it out or you can just run straight. If you keep running, like I said, the coconut will miss you. But either way, you want to be aware of it. The dragon can, of course, destroy the rocks, so it makes it a lot easier. But it's easy either way. This would be a very easy stage even without the dragon. Very, very easy stage. So I believe this is the next checkpoint. Usually when you see the background changes like this. This is an easy stage, but sometimes a little bit irritating because shit will kind of spawn in right above the platforms if you don't know where it is. Because, the Game Boy doesn't show everything at once, so some of the shit just appears as you land on the platform. So sometimes that can be irritating, but it's really, really easy. So I believe after that level you get your next checkpoint. Just watch out for these little foxes. There's not really a lot of enemy density in this game most of the time, so it's pretty fucking relaxed. This part you do have to understand how the frogs work fairly decently. They will jump over you if you're going towards them a lot of times, so that's basically what you want to do. You want to run towards them, and they'll usually jump over you. But you may have to switch. Sometimes you got to do it lower. Sometimes you do it on the upper platform based on what you saw me doing. Will work. And just be aware of the foxes at the end. But other than that, it's very easy. So I didn't have a hammer here. So it made it a little bit tricky, obviously, without a weapon. But I believe you end up getting a hammer eventually. But yeah, I did have to do the stage pretty much without a weapon. So I believe this one was one of the harder ones because of not having a weapon. But see, right here you get a warp, and you can skip the rest of the stage. So that was the only time that I skipped like an entire world. I don't know how much of that world was left, but I was able to skip the rest. So if there was any boss fight there, I didn't have to deal with it, which was good. So my tip for that is just get the warp. I'm sure if you wanted to, you could look up if there's more warps in the game and maybe even get through the game faster. But I just found that one just by playing normally. And of course, I'm just going for beating the game, so for me that's all legit. Anytime you start a new world, you get a checkpoint at the beginning of that world as well. So now another swimming stage. Super fucking easy stages. So these are pretty much like free stages. Even the second one had swimming stages that were, a little bit harder at least than this, but not by much. They were really similar. You can get that hammer down there if you need it. It does help in the swimming stages to have the hammers, that way you can be a little bit more aggressive and just stay in the middle of the screen mostly and kill everything that's in your way. And this may be the next checkpoint. And this is the same shit as before. This might be the one where enemies sometimes kind of just appear on the platform you're on. Because the last one where I mentioned that, I didn't see an example of that. But I know what happened to me on one of these stages, where I had to be a little bit careful. But I mean, once you know where the enemy is, then of course it's not going to be a problem next time. And you get a checkpoint here anyway, I'm pretty sure. See that? Like when you jump up there, you don't know that enemy was going to be there. So that was about it. So you may have to take a hit the first time if you get unlucky. The bat kind of caused me to jump a little short there, so just be aware of that. So now we got another checkpoint. So yeah, pretty much it's the same layout again. Same exact thing as most of the other stages. I believe the stages might get a little bit more aggressive. You know, there's more foxes, more things like that. But you can see the levels are still pretty sparse. But I did find on a lot of those slopes my jump input would get completely eaten. So sometimes you got to move slow on those. But still very easy if you play carefully. So you can get the skateboard here and it's not too dangerous. You know, as long as you make your jumps fairly precisely and keep throwing out the hammers, it does let you take an extra hit. Even though it causes you to kind of auto-scroll to the right. It's not too bad here. You do want to be able to run at full speed, so you probably don't want to set the button to turbo, since you do have to make some pretty big jumps in this stage. So yeah, for the boss I set my button back to turbo. I was able to take it out pretty damn quick. I just stayed up on this edge of the cloud here and just jump as needed, but keep firing hammers, and very easy. You can see this is a very easy pattern to deal with. It might take a little bit longer if you don't have turbo, but it shouldn't take too long. And the final boss is just as easy as these other bosses. It's just two forms, but it's extremely easy. You pretty much just stay in one place. Just be aware of these frogs. It does help if you have some hammers. You can take them out ahead of time. You want to throw some hammers as you're jumping because now the stages are getting more aggressive. You got these swordfish that'll take you out if you don't take them out ahead of time. So try to have some hammers following you. This was the stage where I had controls not responding on the slopes. You see how I got stuck there? I think it didn't respond. And sometimes I'd go right in the fucking lake. So I had to kind of slow down on those little slopes to make sure my jumps went through. So just be aware of that. See how slow I'm moving here? It's because of those shitty ass controls. But as long as you play it kind of slow and careful, you should get most of your inputs to work. I mean, occasionally it will still catch me off guard, even if I'm moving slow. But it's a lot easier to move slow than continuously trying to run through the stage and, you keep ending up in the lake because the controls don't work. So this stage, we're going to have something new. I think it's the stage where the volcanoes are introduced. Though I don't remember if it's in this stage. I'm pretty sure it's in this world. But I mean, even though there's a lot of different elevations and shit, as long as you try to take everything out, you're not going to have too much issue in this game. So there's another bonus stage here. There's not really a benefit to completing them. There's another egg here. This will give you some health back. But see, as long as you're firing aggressively, even with all the slowdown and shit, you can see how slow it's running. But you won't notice how your inputs get eaten until you play the game. Then you'll see what I'm saying. But as long as you keep firing, you're going to clear out most, everything. So we start off with a little fox. But they are really easy to deal with once you understand, what they're going to do. The skateboard is useful on this stage. And it's good to keep firing, because if you get hit, at least you can take an extra hit like that, because there's a lot of shit. So, with the bad control, it can be easy to fuck up. So it helps to have that extra hit. Just be aware before you make this jump that a fox is probably going to run at you. So for this stage, this is your next checkpoint, I believe. You get another little secret room here. You can get some one-ups. I didn't have a hammer at this point, so this was another area where I had to get through for a while without a weapon. Which can be a little tricky. The bats can especially be a little tricky to deal with. So you'll just have to figure out when to jump, and lure them out. These platforms, for some reason, seem to cause a lot of slowdown or some issues. So when you get on them, just be aware that your jump button may not work again. Just like with the slopes, the platforms seem to cause trouble too. So just play it carefully and make sure your jump button responds. It helps to just stop on the platform for like a second or so, and then move to the right and jump. I found that by doing that, I had more consistency. The problem was when I tried, normally I would try to run onto the platform, jump on the platform, jump again immediately. But a lot of times that wouldn't work. So this is where the volcanoes get introduced, which are very simple. The volcano, what it will do is it will shoot two balls to the left and then one ball to the right. That's all it does. As long as you're moving at full speed, just like with the coconuts, you'll never have to get in between them. You'll automatically dodge it. Just make sure you're running at full speed when the volcanoes are present. And you won't have to stop and try to dodge anything. Just keep running to the right. And they will never hit you. So they are very easy. It looks like you may have to dodge a little bit, but not if you know that you can just keep running at full speed. So now for this boss, just get right here and jam the shit out of it and, jump the one projectile. It shouldn't have much time to shoot more than once. If you don't have rapid fire, maybe it can shoot a few times. I'd have to adjust my playing for, some of these bosses if I wasn't using that. So this is the final stage. So yeah, you see I left the death in there, but I think I suicided intentionally. So now you get hammers really early in the stage. Sometimes what I would do, I would suicide to get my lives back. Since this is a checkpoint, you can get all your lives back by suiciding. Or what I did most of the time was I loaded a save state at the beginning of this world. because, that's how the game would restore me if I suicided. So it's just faster to load the state like that. So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing me resetting by loading states. Sometimes it's hard to catch that in editing. But I never use save states to get ahead of the game or, try to get extra cheats or anything like that. So that's a little bit of a big gap, but as long as you're running, you'll be able to make that. That's why you may not want to have turbo held down for this, for this stage, because there are some decently sized jumps. But really, it's all the same shit. It's just a little remix, like all the stages are. But it's nothing hard. But soon we'll be at the final stretch, which requires you to beat a few stages in a row before the boss, I believe. So it can be a little tricky. So this is another free stage. These water levels are extremely easy. There's really nothing to these stages. It's good to get the fruit in these stages because since you move so slow, it is easier to run out of time in the water stages. So that's, you may want to collect the fruit when you see them just to make sure, because they don't give you a massive amount of fruit. You get some milk here. I believe this water stage is a little bit longer than the other ones, but it's just so fucking easy. It doesn't really matter because there's really nothing to it. But that may be the hardest of the water stages. So this is another one of those volcano stages. Just jump over the little lava rivers. I'm assuming they hurt you, but I don't think I've ever died from that because I always just jumped over those little lava rivers. I assume that you're not supposed to walk on those. So make sure you have a full run speed, like I said, and as long as you're running full when they first appear, you'll run right through it for those volcanoes. But if not, then you have to be a little bit more careful. Sometimes it's hard to get a running start with these in this stage because there's a lot of little things that you have to jump. So it does kind of mess up your running start. So now I believe this is the final checkpoint of the game coming up, if I remember right. So I don't think there's any more checkpoints. I think you have to beat the rest of the game from this point on. So you may not have any hammers, so get your hammer here. Jump those two crabs. Now you swim a little bit, keep firing your hammers. And try to take out the bats, obviously, because they can cause problems. With the shells, you have to, it's good to hit them to make them cower into their shell, and then you can easily jump over them. It's better to do that than to let them keep moving and try to jump over them while they're moving. It makes it harder. So, try to get them to go in the shell first and then jump them. As long as you keep bombarding them with hammers, they'll stay in their shell. So, they're not really a threat. You can get a little water beast here. which is useful to keep for the final boss because then you can take an extra hit, and it's easy to keep. So this is it for this first stage, and now there's only one more stage left. And this stage is very easy, as you can see. Not much to it. This next stage is very easy, too. It's just easy to fuck up if you're trying to move fast because of the inputs getting eaten got me killed multiple times on this stage, which was just irritating. So learn out these drops. Let them fall first. Make sure you're killing the frog. You know, if you die and lose your hammer, then reset. You know, start over at the previous stage. Because without a hammer, you're going to be in trouble for this stage. It's going to be a lot harder. So whenever that happened, I would just suicide. Make sure you at least bring us a hammer to this stage. You don't need to have the little beast, but at least have the hammer. Because I don't know if they give you a hammer on this stage. So I don't think they do. So just make sure you get here with at least a hammer. Aside from that, just play it safe. Now, I would toggle between turbo and turning my turbo off. Like, once I got past here, I turned turbo off on my controller because there's going to be a big jump right here. See that big jump? You can't make that with turbo on. Now, maybe I could have made it if I went down first to the lower ledge and made the jump, but I always did it that way. And just try to take out what you can ahead of time, obviously. But it's easy. It's the hardest part of the game, but that's not saying much. So now for the boss, if you have the rideable beast, you're in a really good position. You should be able to take an extra hit, but it doesn't matter. You don't need it. It doesn't give you any extra weapon power with this beast. So anyway, yeah, just do this, you know, get a bunch of hammers in and then just jump. And now the second form is going to appear. And this is it. Game fucking over. Now you may have to jump twice like you saw me doing to dodge a little bit. So just practice that with save states. And like I said, if you're not using turbo, then, you know, practice is going to be even more important because you may have to dodge that for a little longer. And you may not even be able to stand there for that long. I don't know, because like I was going for speed kills. You know, so sometimes turbo does speed things up. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll have a review up probably later today. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.